Welcome to the Jerich Show, featuring your hosts Javvad Malik and Erich Krohn. Timely topics, poorly presented.
Hello and welcome to a very late edition of the Jerich Show. We've been having horrible internet connection problems for the last hour or so, which is why one or both of us might appear heavily pixelated. Also, we're recording this a day late because Erich had to go in for some more medical treatment. How are you feeling now, Erich?
I'm actually feeling
He's feeling pretty good. So that's good to hear that Erich is doing good. And that's all we wanted to get to. No need to labor the point any longer than needed. So the first story we're going to touch on today is Kia hit with $20 million ransom attack. I'm going to stop my camera just because I think I'm very, very blocky. But Erich, what do you make of this?
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting one. Apparently, a lot of customers had problems, even to the point that they couldn't pick up the cars that they had purchased, things like that. Now, what's interesting is Bleeping Computer had the ransom screen as a screenshot on there, yet Kia is kind of denying that it was a ransomware attack that caused this. So it impacted internal and external systems. It took care of a lot of issues out there, which unfortunately, I mean, for an organization, if you can't let your customers pick up the car they purchased, that could be kind of a bad thing. The part that does bother me, I think, on this one is just that we're getting all these conflicting reports about whether it was ransomware or not. So, you know, if you've heard us before, one of the big things that I always preach on is be transparent, be truthful to people when this kind of stuff happens. And that's going to build the trust that you're going to recover from it fine and keep them safe. Now, again, one place shows a screenshot for Kia and then they're denying it. So we'll have to see what comes out in the end. But it is unfortunate, and it did take down an awful lot of things.
And just on a side note, just because, we often talk about adverts tracking us and who's listening to us, there's this advert on the side of this screen which is talking about 15 cybersecurity tips for small and medium-sized businesses. And Erich Krohn is one of the speakers on there. Is that the only reason you sent me the link to this article, Erich?
No, it's actually kind of interesting. It is through ThreatPost that we'll be doing this, but no, this is just how where the article came up through. So interesting, very, very interesting. Yeah. That's a whole nother episode, is how they, creepily track you.
Yeah. So, what this actually got me thinking about a few days ago is that when ransomware hits, it obviously availability is one of the first things that goes. Obviously, if they've stolen data or whatever, the confidentiality is there as well. But availability is the biggest concern, and so systems become unavailable. But with remote working, I was thinking availability might take on a different turn of events as well, because people are working from their homes or wherever they might be. You might not be able to take down every employee in an organization because they're not all centralized using the same internet, but you could take down key employees, and they've got less robust measures to protect themselves. How many people are just thinking about this today? Like we were having internet difficulties connecting today, but I only have the one internet connection. I don't have 2 or 3 like an office would. So it'll be interesting to see how in the future, as more organizations adopt, even once the pandemic's over, I don't think everyone's going to be rushing back to the office and it'll be same like 2019 all over again. But there'll be an element of rotation, or some people coming in and out of the office and what have you. And how sort of denial of service attacks work in that regard, or just simply people not being able to join or what have you. It'll be an interesting dilemma. I think that one that we will have to see how it plays out. Which is my one thing. I have no idea how we're going to tackle it.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, if you could figure out where the CEO from an organization is, with their IP address, where that's coming from, you could DDoS that and basically make them ineffective, and if you pick good timings when they're having board meetings or, financial meetings, stuff like that. You could really impact just day to day with a very simple DDoS attack on a home system. And how are these routers going to deal with that? So that could be an interesting topic of discussion sometime.
Indeed. Speaking of other interesting things, and moving away from ransomware for a second or two, there is some new malware that has been found that is native to the new M1 chips on the Macs. And for some reason, this
lovely internet you have here.
Carry on.
So I was going to try to blame the pixelation of his face on a filter. However, you can see we're really struggling with this today. But it is interesting. And the reason I actually wanted to bring this one up is, for years, folks were saying, oh, I run a Mac. Everything's safe. I don't even need endpoint protection. And I think that's still pervasive in a lot of people's minds, that Macs are somehow safer than PCs. And that's changed, though. That is not the case at all. So they're already writing stuff targeting the new M1 stuff. And we just have to get past that mindset that Macs are not vulnerable to this kind of thing.
That's right. I think there's been a lot of behaviors that people have adopted because they assume something is less secure, or more secure than something else, and they can go about doing whatever they want, or downloading stuff, or installing software. But yeah, it's not quite like that. And the stuff that, like, something that's native to the chip is that's dangerous stuff, because once it gets in there, then it's really hard to detect and remove and what have you.
Well, we've seen patches where we have to deal with that, with a hardware issue, and so they do a software patch that slows down. I mean, cough, heartbleed, stuff like that. There's been some other sorts of things out there that have they've done software to fix the hardware problem, and yeah, it ain't pretty.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, like, what we see is, especially with Macs and the M1 chips at the moment, you have to think who are the people that buy these, and these are at the moment they're very much the early adopters to the Mac cycle, and they're people with disposable income, or who might have because these aren't cheap machines to go out and buy on a whim. If you're going through a refresh, if your existing device is end of life and you're looking for the new one, then that's one thing. But so you're targeting people with a certain level of buying power as well with something like this. There are actually reports of, like, sites, holiday sites or flight booking sites. They'll actually see which browser or device you're coming from, and if you're coming from an Apple device, they'll actually bump up the price compared to if you're coming from a Windows. And apparently you get cash back if you're coming on a Chromebook. So that's where I do all of my...
They actually pay you to travel if you're on a Chromebook. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, you start breaking it down by, they're still on an iPhone 6, it's 50% off for them. Now, you say, though, disposable income and stuff, but if you look at the people in line so often when the Mac, the Apple releases happen for the overpriced AirPods, which I am guilty of having here. A lot of times it's like college kids and stuff like that. I think they use their student loans to buy stuff like this. But either way, if you think about it, this is probably the stuff that executives are going to be getting. And then you have them working from home in a lot of cases, and now they're vulnerable to some very specific attacks. We just cannot let our guard down just because we use a platform over another.
That's right. And you're right. I think maybe disposable income was the wrong term to use. It's people who are willing to pay that much money, who've got access to credit, or parents, or some form of means to pay for these things. So
yeah. All right. So I think we're back to ransomware on this next story, aren't we?
We are. But it's also one of these things that shock. Criminals do not stick to their word.
Yeah, this is kind of a no-brainer, and it is something that honestly I've been mentioning on, like, my ransomware talks. I do a lot of ransomware talks because people do want to hear about it. But I've been trying to make people understand that, even though you pay the ransom and they say, oh, we destroyed the data, you got no way of knowing that. And they may not dump it publicly, but they're going to turn around. They're going to monetize it on the dark web. They're going to try to make money off of it, right? They would be foolish to delete the data that they say they got from you. It doesn't make sense if you think about it that way. So, it's kind of a bad situation, because if that's out there, what do you do? Do you not pay just because they're not going to? Probably not. I mean, if you're in the point where you're having to pay the ransom, you've had some bad things happen here. Now, it is interesting that I saw in here a couple of tricks they used. I think in one, they showed one type of data. They actually showed false data, and now they're coming back and re-ransoming more data later, sort of deal. So they said they deleted this, but then they come back and re-ransom them for things. It's an ugly world out there, and ransomware is just getting more and more ugly. The groups that are doing this are just, brutalizing places of business in the middle of this thing that we're dealing with on top of things. And I just don't even know how we're going to get our hands around this, to be honest with you.
Have you seen that movie with Michael Keaton in it about McDonald's? He plays Ray Kroc in it. I can't remember the movie's name. But no. There's a bit in it where Ray Kroc, he sets up the McDonald's franchise, and he's struggling to make money, even though he's franchised it out to a lot of people. And his finance officer, who he hires, accountant, he says to him, "You don't realize the business you're in." He goes, "That's why you're not making money." And he's like, "Well, what business is?" He goes, "You're not in the fast food industry." He goes, "You're in the property business." He goes, let your franchisees find the land, then you give them a loan, like a mortgage to pay for the land, and they pay you a franchise fee and what have you. So you own the land, you're getting money from that, and you're getting franchise fee, and on top of that, you're selling your food. He goes, that's the industry you're in. You're not really in the fast food industry. You're in the property industry. And if you look at it, McDonald's got prime real estate all over the world. And this is kind of how ransomware has evolved as well. They started to just ransom computers, like, give us money, until someone woke up one day and said, like, that's not the business we're in. We're in the data business. If we can steal the data, then that's where our real profit is. Everything else is secondary. So this is why, to your point, it's foolish of them to have that gold in their hand and then delete it just because someone's paid them. Well, they can go and resell that again 2, 3, 4, 5 times, or re-ransom them time and time again. So I thought it's an interesting trend that's evolved in the business of ransomware.
Yeah, and with the prices of ransoms this day and age, I mean, it's ridiculous what they're doing. I think last study I saw, Coveware, I think it was 111,000 was the average ransom first quarter of 2020. I mean, that's pretty brutal. We used to see the $200, $300, $500 per machine ransoms, and now we're talking about 111,000 as the average ransom demand. Man, that's nothing to joke about. It's big, it's bad, it's ugly. And the more they can leverage on people, like getting this data out there, the worse it is. And we see it all the time. Every week, we see more and more of these sorts of things happening. And unfortunately, that's the part that makes the news, really, though, is that the information being stolen. That's what gets you on the front page, is the data breach. Unlike Kia, but Kia was very much, in people's faces with respect to not being able to pick up cars and stuff, right? But when we look at those things that are there on the web every week, it's always about data, always about the data.
It is. So anyway, before you scold me for forgetting to mention it, follow us, thejerichshow.podbean.com, if you want to hear the audio version only. Otherwise, YouTube, search for The Jerich Show on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at The Jerich Show. Have I missed anything, Erich?
I don't think so. I think.
Okay, so I haven't missed anything. And with that, thank you very much for joining us. We will see you again next week, hopefully with better internet connection. Stay secure, my friend.